a military officer haunted by his mother's abandonment and his wife Vera's betrayal. The film masterfully interweaves flashbacks of happier times with the stark reality of Alexei's present struggles, creating a profound contrast that amplifies his sense of loss. As he grapples with his demanding career and the turmoil of his personal life, we delve into his innermost thoughts and emotions. The night air was heavy, almost as if it carried the weight of Colonel Alexei Ivanov's brooding thoughts. Standing alone on the balcony of his Moscow apartment, he gazed out over the city's glittering skyline, a stark contrast to the darkness brewing in his heart. The dim glow of the streetlights below barely pierced the shadows, much like the remnants of joy in Alexei's life, which seemed to have been swallowed by an insatiable abyss. Inside the apartment, the remnants of his broken family life lay scattered. A photograph of a happier time, a child's drawing taped haphazardly on the fridge, a woman's scarf forgotten in the rush of departure. Each object was a relic of a past that Alexei could neither return to nor fully let go. His thoughts drifted back to the day he had met Vera. She had been a vision of grace and beauty, her laughter a melody that had once filled the rooms of this now silent apartment. They had been young, full of dreams and promises, their love a fortress against the world. But as time passed, the fortress crumbled, walls weakened by secrets and unspoken grievances. The day Vera left, taking their son Jaeger with her, was the day the last stone fell. The echo of his heartache was interrupted by the shrill ring of the telephone. Reluctantly, Alexei stepped back inside, the coldness of the room enveloping him as he picked up the receiver. It was his commanding officer, reminding him of the early morning mission. Duty called, as it always did, a relentless demand that had become both his refuge and his prison. As he prepared for bed, Alexei's mind wandered to his childhood, another battlefield where he had fought a different kind of war. His mother, a woman of fierce spirit and tender heart, had been his anchor in a tumultuous sea. But she too had abandoned him, leaving a void that no amount of military accolades could fill. The keepsake she had left him, a small, worn-out Russian doll, sat on his bedside table, a silent witness to his unhealed wounds. Lying in bed, Alexei's mind was a battlefield of memories and regrets. He remembered the tender moments with Vera, their first dance, the birth of Jaeger, the quiet evenings by the fireplace. These memories, once a source of joy, now tormented him, each a reminder of what he had lost. The night deepened, and Alexei found himself in the clutches of a restless sleep, haunted by dreams of happier days. He saw himself as a young boy, running through the fields behind his childhood home, his mother's laughter ringing in his ears. Then the scene shifted, and he was back in the apartment, Vera's tear-streaked face looking at him, her eyes a mix of sorrow and accusation. The dream shifted again, and Alexei was on the battlefield, the sound of gunfire and shouts filling the air. He was leading his men, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. But even here, in the chaos of war, his thoughts were with his family, the pain of their absence a constant shadow. As dawn broke, Alexei woke up, his heart heavy with the burden of his memories. He knew that the day ahead would be filled with challenges, both on the battlefield and within his own soul. But he also knew that he could not run from his past forever. He needed to face it, to confront the demons that haunted him, and to find a way to heal the wounds that had been left behind. Alexei rose from his bed, the resolve in his eyes reflecting a determination to not only fulfill his duties as a soldier, but also to embark on the most challenging mission of his life, the journey towards forgiveness and peace. As the early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a geometric pattern on the floor, Alexei dressed in his military uniform with mechanical precision. Each button fastened, each badge in place, was a testament to his unwavering commitment to duty. But beneath the starched fabric of his uniform lay a heart that beat to a different rhythm, one that longed for peace in a life torn apart by betrayal and loss. On his way to the base, Alexei's mind was a tumult of emotions. The bustling streets of Moscow, with their morning rush and cacophony, seemed distant, as if he were observing them from another world. People hurried past, lost in their own lives, unaware of the inner battle raging within the man who stood silently among them. Arriving at the base, Alexei was greeted with the respectful salutations of his subordinates. He was a figure of admiration, his military prowess and leadership qualities undeniable. Yet, as he walked through the corridors lined with commendations and honors, a sense of hollowness crept over him. These accolades, once his source of pride, now seemed like empty gestures in the face of his personal turmoil. In the solitude of his office, Alexei found himself staring at a blank piece of paper. It was to be a letter to Jager, his son, who he had not seen since Vera took him away. The words refused to come. How could he explain to a child the complexities of adult failures? How could he express the depth of his love and the pain of his absence? The morning passed in a blur of meetings and strategic planning. Alexei's mind, trained for combat and strategy, tackled each task with efficiency. But the veneer of the consummate officer could not fully mask the troubled man underneath. In moments of quiet, his thoughts inevitably drifted back to Vera and Jager, to the life they had once shared. Lunchtime brought a brief respite as Alexei joined his fellow officers in the mess hall. The camaraderie and banter were a welcome distraction, but even amidst the laughter and jokes, his heart remained elsewhere. He listened to the stories of his comrades, their tales of family life, their trivial complaints about domestic bliss. They seemed like echoes from a life he once knew, a life that now felt like a distant dream. After lunch, Alexei visited the base's chapel, seeking solace in its quietude. The chapel was small, a nondescript room with a simple altar and a few rows of pews. Here, away from the demands of his rank and the expectations of his peers, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. Sitting in the last pew, Alexei closed his eyes, the silence enveloping him like a blanket. In this sacred space, he allowed the facade to fall away, revealing the raw wounds of his heart. Memories of Vera flooded his mind. The way her hair fell across her face, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her touch. With these memories came the pain of her betrayal, a betrayal that had shattered his trust and left him adrift in a sea of doubt. The chapel's stillness was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Startled, Alexei opened his eyes to find Father Mikhail, the base chaplain, approaching him. The priest's kind eyes and gentle demeanor had always provided a sense of comfort to the soldiers. "Colonel Ivanov, is there anything I can help you with?" Father Mikhail asked, his voice soft yet perceptive. Alexei hesitated, the words trapped in his throat. It was not in his nature to reveal his weaknesses, least of all his emotional struggles. But in the presence of the priest, he felt a sense of safety, a rare opportunity to unburden his soul. "I'm at war, Father," Alexei finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just out there on the battlefield, but within. I'm fighting a battle against my own memories, my own heart." Father Mikhail listened intently, his presence a silent source of strength. As Alexei poured out his heart, speaking of Vera, Jager, and his mother's abandonment, the priest remained a compassionate witness to his pain. "You seek peace, Alexei." Father Mikhail spoke gently after a moment of contemplation. But peace is not just the absence of war. It's the reconciliation of the heart with its past, the acceptance of what cannot be changed, and the courage to move forward. These words struck a chord in Alexei. He realized that his quest for peace was not just about overcoming the pain of betrayal, but about finding a way to live with it, to learn from it, and to grow beyond it. As Alexei left the chapel, he felt a subtle shift within him. The weight of his past still lingered, but there was now a glimmer of hope, a faint light guiding him towards a future where peace might be possible. He knew the journey would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Alexei Ivanov felt ready to embark on it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Alexei's office, mirroring the darkness that had stretched over his heart. He sat there motionless, his eyes fixed on the photograph on his desk, a memento of a time when smiles were genuine and love was unblemished. The image of Vera, radiant and full of life. Beside him, a younger, more naive version of himself, evoked a torrent of emotions. It was in this very picture that the roots of betrayal lay hidden, beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect life. The door to his office creaked open, and in walked Major Ilian, Alexei's trusted comrade and confidant. The Major's presence was always a source of comfort. His easygoing nature and unshakable loyalty, a stark contrast to the complexities of Alexei's internal struggles. "Alexei, you've been cooped up in here all day," Ilian remarked, concern etched on his face. "The men are starting to wonder if you're planning a secret mission without them." Alexei offered a weak smile, appreciative of Ilian's attempt to lighten the mood. "Just strategizing, old friend," he replied, though they both knew it was a half-truth. Ilian took a seat opposite Alexei, his gaze lingering on the photograph. "She was something special, wasn't she?" he said softly, acknowledging the elephant in the room. Alexei's fingers traced the edges of the photograph as memories came flooding back. He remembered the first time he met Vera at a military ball. She had captivated him instantly with her wit and charm. They had danced the night away, lost in each other's eyes, oblivious to the world around them. It was a whirlwind romance, filled with passion and promises. They were young, in love, and invincible. Or so they thought. But as Alexei's career in the military took off, the demands of his job began to take a toll on their marriage. Long periods of absence, the constant danger, and the burden of secrecy created a chasm between them. Vera, once so full of life and ambition, became a shadow of her former self, her light dimming with each passing day. "I never saw it coming, Alexei confessed, his voice a mix of sorrow and disbelief. "The signs were there, but I was too caught up in my own world to see them." Ilian listened, his expression one of empathy. He had seen his fair share of broken hearts and shattered dreams in the military, but it pained him to see his friend in such distress. "The job we do, it asks a lot from us, Alexei." "Sometimes too much," Ilian said, his words heavy with the weight of shared experiences. Alexei nodded, a sense of regret washing over him. He had given his all to the military, but in doing so, he had neglected the very people who meant the most to him. Vera had been his anchor, his home, but he had left her adrift in a sea of loneliness and despair. And in her loneliness, she had sought solace in the arms of another. The clock on the wall ticked away, marking the passage of time, a cruel reminder of what had been lost. The roots of betrayal, Alexei realized, were not just in Vera's actions, but in his own failures as a husband and a partner. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but acknowledging it was the first step towards understanding, and perhaps towards forgiveness. As the day came to a close, Alexei and Ilian parted ways, each lost in their own thoughts. For Alexei, the evening brought no respite, only a deepening sense of loss and a burning question that haunted his every waking moment. Could he ever forgive Vera? And more importantly, could he forgive himself? The evening fell like a curtain, heavy and suffocating, on the day that changed everything for Colonel Alexei Ivanov. He sat in his dimly lit living room, a glass of vodka in hand, its contents as bitter as the turmoil in his heart. The shadows danced on the walls, mirroring the chaos of his thoughts. Tonight was not just another evening. It was the anniversary of the day he discovered Vera's betrayal. It had been a crisp autumn day. Much like this one, when Alexei returned home unexpectedly from a military mission. The joy of surprising his family had been palpable in his heart, a rare opportunity to be the husband and father he so often longed to be. But as he opened the door to their apartment, the scene that greeted him was far from the warm welcome he had envisioned. There, in the very heart of their home, was Vera, in the arms of another man. The shock of the scene before him was like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. The laughter, the whispers, the intimacy of the moment shattered the illusion of their perfect life. In an instant, the foundation of their marriage, built on trust and love, crumbled into dust. The glass in Alexei's hand trembled as he recalled the confrontation that followed. Vera's tearful apologies, the other man's hurried exit, the way his son Jaeger had looked at him, confusion and fear in his young eyes. The memory was like a wound that refused to heal, a constant reminder of the life he had lost. That day, Alexei had walked out of the apartment, his mind a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and disbelief. Streets had been a blur, the faces of passers-by meaningless. He had wandered for hours, the cold air numbing his body but doing nothing to soothe his tormented soul. Now, a year later, the pain was as fresh as ever. The vodka did little to dull the sharp edges of his memories. If anything, it brought them into sharper focus, each moment replaying in his mind with cruel clarity. The sound of Jaeger's voice broke through his reverie. He had almost forgotten that he had recorded his son's laughter, a desperate attempt to keep a part of him close. The recording was a double-edged sword, a source of comfort and a piercing reminder of what he had lost. Jaeger's innocent laughter, once the music of their home, now echoed in the hollow chambers of Alexei's heart. As the night deepened, Alexei's thoughts turned darker. The betrayal had not just taken away his wife and son. It had stripped him of his identity. He had been a husband, a father, a man who believed in love and loyalty. Now, he was just a shell, a soldier with no war to fight, a commander with no one to lead. The clock struck midnight, marking the end of the anniversary of his life's greatest tragedy. Alexei stood up, his movement sluggish, the weight of his despair like chains around his feet. He walked to Jaeger's room, now empty and untouched since the day they left. He ran his fingers over the toys, the books, the little clothes, each item a fragment of a life that was no more. In that room, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, Alexei Ivanov made a decision. He could no longer live in the shadows of what had been. He needed to face the truth, confront the pain, and find a way to move forward. It was a daunting task, one that filled him with fear and uncertainty. But he knew it was the only way to salvage the remnants of his broken heart and rebuild his life, piece by shattered piece. With a newfound resolve, Alexei turned off the light, leaving the room and its memories behind. He stepped into the darkness of the corridor, a man on a mission, not of war, but of personal redemption. The journey would be long and arduous, but for the first time in a long time, Alexei Ivanov was ready to face it head on. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains of Alexei Ivanov's bedroom, casting a soft glow across the room. He lay in bed, his eyes open but unseeing, lost in the labyrinth of his thoughts. The decision he had made the night before, to confront his pain and seek a path forward, loomed over him like a mountain he was unsure he could climb. Outside, the world was waking up, but inside, Alexei's world was in turmoil. The debate raged within him. Should he confront the past, face Vera, and seek answers to the questions that haunted him? Or should he withdraw further into his shell, burying his emotions under the facade of the disciplined military officer? The weight of his military duties provided a convenient excuse to avoid dealing with his personal life. The uniform, the rank, the respect of his subordinates. All these were armors against the vulnerability of his emotional wounds. But as he lay there, staring at the ceiling, Alexei knew that even the strongest armor could not protect him from the battle raging inside. His thoughts turned to Vera, the woman who had been his partner, his confidant, his love. The betrayal had changed everything, but the memories of their life together still lingered, sweet and painful in equal measure. He remembered the dreams they had shared, the plans they had made, and how effortlessly their lives had intertwined. But alongside these memories were the unanswered questions. Why had Vera strayed? What had he failed to see? Was there anything he could have done differently? These questions were like a relentless tide, eroding the foundations of his resolve. Then there was Jaeger, their son, the innocent victim in the wreckage of their marriage. Alexei's heart ached at the thought of his son growing up in a broken home, the joy of their family life, replaced by the coldness of separation. He longed to reach out, to be a part of Jaeger's life, to explain, to apologize, to make things right. But the fear of rejection, the uncertainty of Vera's response, held him back. As the morning progressed, Alexei's internal debate continued. He went about his morning routine mechanically, each step a distraction from the decision he needed to make. The shower's hot stream did little to wash away the confusion. The breakfast tasted like ash in his mouth, and the uniform felt like a costume he had put on to play a part. Later, as he drove to the base, the city around him seemed to mirror his inner conflict. The busy streets, the rushing people, the cacophony of city life, all seemed to be moving in a direction he could not find. He felt like a ship adrift in a storm, tossed by waves of doubt and fear. At the base, Alexei threw himself into his work, hoping to drown out the voices in his head. But the more he tried to focus on his duties, the louder the voices became. Every report he read, every meeting he attended, felt meaningless compared to the turmoil in his heart. Lunchtime found him in the mess hall, surrounded by his comrades, yet feeling utterly alone. The conversation around him was a distant buzz. Their laughter, a foreign language he could no longer understand. He picked at his food, his appetite lost in the sea of his thoughts. The afternoon was no different. The hours dragged on, each minute a reminder of the decision he was postponing. The setting sun cast long shadows across his office, mirroring the darkness that had settled over his heart. As the day came to a close, Alexei knew he could not delay any longer. The time had come to face his demons, to confront the past, and to take the first step towards healing. With a deep breath, he picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. It was time to break the silence, to reach out to Vera, to begin the journey towards understanding and, perhaps, forgiveness. The phone rang, each tone a heartbeat in the void of his anticipation. Would she answer? What would he say? The question swirled in his mind as he waited for the voice that would either open the door to the past or seal it forever. The ring of the phone seemed to echo in the emptiness of Alexei's office, each tone a reverberation of his racing heart. When Vera's voice finally came through, it was like a gust of wind, stirring long-forgotten leaves. "Alexei," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and caution. "Vera, it's me," Alexei replied, his voice steadier than he felt. The simplicity of the words belied the turmoil beneath. This was the moment of stepping into the unknown, the point of no return in his journey towards confronting his past. There was a pause, a silence that stretched between them, filled with years of unspoken words and buried emotions. Then Vera spoke, her voice hesitant. "Why are you calling, Alexei? After all this time?" Alexei's grip on the phone tightened. He had rehearsed this conversation in his mind 1,000 times, but now, faced with the reality of it, words eluded him. "I needed to talk to you. About us, about Jaeger." Vera's response was a soft sigh, a sound that spoke volumes of the pain and complexity of their shared history. "What is there left to say, Alexei? You made your choice. I made mine." The accusation in her words stung, but Alexei knew it was not undeserved. "I know I've been absent, more than I should have been," he admitted. "But I want to be a part of Jaeger's life. I need to make things right, Vera." There was another pause, longer this time. Alexei could almost picture Vera on the other end, wrestling with her own emotions, the memories of their life together, a tapestry of love and pain. "Jaeger misses you," Vera finally said, her voice tinged with sadness. "He asks about you sometimes. I don't know what to tell him." The mention of his son was a sharp pang in Alexei's heart. Tell him, I miss him too, and that I'm sorry. Sorry for everything. The conversation that followed was a tentative dance. Two people circling the remnants of their relationship, each step fraught with uncertainty and fear. They spoke of Jaeger, of his school, his friends, the little details of his life that Alexei had missed. With each word, the distance between them seemed to lessen, the barriers of hurt and betrayal slowly eroding. But the deeper issues remained unaddressed, a chasm of unspoken truths and unresolved feelings. The question of their marriage, the reasons behind Vera's betrayal, the future of their family. All these were shadows lurking just beneath the surface of their conversation. As they spoke, Alexei felt a shift within him. The anger and bitterness that had consumed him for so long began to give way to a different emotion, empathy. For the first time, he saw Vera, not just as the woman who had betrayed him, but as a person who had struggled, who had made mistakes, who had suffered as much as he had. The call ended with a promise to talk again, to keep the lines of communication open for the sake of Jaeger. It was a small step, but a significant one. Alexei hung up the phone, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He had stepped into the unknown, and in doing so, had opened the door to a new chapter in his life. The evening found Alexei alone in his apartment, the conversation with Vera replaying in his mind. He realized that the journey ahead would be difficult, filled with hard truths and painful revelations. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward through the tangled mess of their past. As he lay in bed that night, Alexei's thoughts drifted to Jaeger, the innocent soul caught in the crossfire of their failed marriage. He made a silent vow to his son, a promise to be the father he deserved, no matter what the future held. The path ahead was uncertain, the outcome unknown, but Alexei Ivanov had taken the first step, and that was a beginning. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains of Vera Ivanova's modest apartment, casting a warm glow on the walls adorned with Jaeger's drawings. She sat at the small kitchen table, her mind a whirlpool of emotions stirred up by Alexei's call the night before. It had been a long time since she heard his voice, a voice that once promised love and security, but had become a distant echo in her life's tumultuous journey. Vera sipped her tea, each sip a reminder of the morning she and Alexei had shared, lost in conversation and laughter. Those days seemed like a lifetime ago, a chapter from a different book. Now her world revolved around Jaeger, their son, the only piece of Alexei she had kept close to her heart. Her thoughts drifted back to the days when their love was new and full of promise. Alexei had been her rock, her safe haven in a world of uncertainty. But as his military career took off, he became more a ghost than a husband, his presence in their home fleeting and filled with the tension of unspoken frustrations. Vera remembered the loneliness, the long nights waiting for a call that rarely came, the growing sense of abandonment. She had tried to fill the void with activities, with friends, but nothing could replace the warmth of a partner, the shared journey of a marriage. Then came the fateful day when she met Dmitri, a friend of a friend. Dmitri had offered her a shoulder to lean on, a listening ear, a presence that Alexei had ceased to be. It had started innocently, a friendship born out of shared experiences. But as time passed, the lines blurred, and what had been innocent turned into something more, something that would eventually shatter her life with Alexei. Vera closed her eyes, the guilt of her betrayal a heavy cloak around her shoulders. She had never intended to hurt Alexei, to break their vows, but in her loneliness, she had made a choice that she could never take back. The sound of Jaeger's laughter brought her back to the present. He was playing in the living room, his innocence a stark contrast to the complexity of the adult world. Vera watched him, her heart swelling with love and aching with sorrow for the family they could have been. Jaeger's questions about his father were becoming more frequent, his curiosity a natural longing for the parent he barely knew. Vera struggled with how much to tell him, how to explain the absence of a father in a way that a child could understand. Alexei's call had opened a floodgate of memories and emotions. Part of her longed to reconnect, to rebuild the bridges they had burnt down. But another part was afraid of the pain, the judgments, the reopening of wounds that had taken so long to heal. As she watched Jaeger play, Vera made a decision. She would take it one step at a time for Jaeger's sake. She would open the door to Alexei, but with caution, with the awareness that the path ahead was fraught with uncertainties. The day passed in a blur of household chores and work commitments. But beneath the routine, Vera's mind was a sea of thoughts, each wave crashing against the shore of her resolve. In the evening, after putting Jaeger to bed, Vera sat down with a pen and paper. She decided to write to Alexei, to put into words what she couldn't say over the phone. The letter started with a simple, "Dear Alexei," but each word that followed was a struggle, a balancing act between honesty and restraint. She wrote of her loneliness, her regrets, her love for Jaeger. She wrote of the pain, the betrayal, and the hope for a better future for their son. The letter was not an apology, nor was it an accusation. It was an attempt to bridge the gap between them, a step towards understanding and co-parenting. Sealing the envelope, Vera felt a mix of relief and apprehension. This letter could either open a new chapter in their lives or close the book forever. But regardless of the outcome, Vera knew that she had taken a step towards healing, not just for herself, but for Jaeger, and perhaps even for Alexei. In the days that followed Vera's letter, Alexei found himself in a state of anticipation mixed with apprehension. He had opened the envelope with a sense of trepidation, Vera's neat handwriting greeting him like an old friend. Her words were a balm and a blade, soothing yet cutting deep into the fabric of his memories. As he read, memories of their life together resurfaced, moments of joy and laughter, echoes of past that seemed both distant and painfully close. He remembered the early days of their romance, the fun and games of their budding love, the memory of their first vacation together. A trip to the serene landscapes of the Ural Mountains came back to him. They had been so in love, so free of the burdens that would later weigh them down. Alexei remembered the way Vera's eyes had sparkled with excitement as they hiked through the lush forests, her laughter echoing against the backdrop of the towering trees. They had been adventurous, exploring hidden trails, picnicking beside crystal-clear lakes, and watching the stars from their tent, wrapped in each other's arms, whispering dreams of the future. Those were the days of blissful ignorance, where the only reality was their love and the only certainty was their togetherness. Alexei recalled their playful arguments, their silly bets, and the way Vera's nose would scrunch up when she laughed. It was a time when the shadows of duty and betrayal had not yet touched their lives. But as Alexei turned the pages of memory, the darker chapters began to unfold. The days when he had to leave for sudden missions, the nights Vera spent alone, waiting for a call that came too late or not at all. He remembered the growing distance, the silence that settled between them, a gap that widened with every unspoken word. The realization that their marriage had been fraying at the edges long before the betrayal was a hard pill to swallow. Alexei saw in painful clarity how his absence had created a void in Vera's life, a void he had been too blind to see. The memories were like a kaleidoscope, shifting and turning, presenting a different picture with each twist. The good times were bright and vivid, full of color and life. But the bad times were gray and somber, a stark contrast to the joy that once was. In the midst of these reflections, Alexei realized that their love had not been perfect, but it had been real. They had shared something beautiful, something worth remembering, despite the pain. And amidst the ruins of their relationship, there was still a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild, not as lovers, but as co-parents, as partners in Jaeger's life. As he put the letter away, Alexei felt a sense of closure. The past could not be changed, but it could be accepted. He could learn from it, grow from it, and perhaps find a way to forgive, both Vera and himself. The next day, Alexei made a decision. He would reach out to Vera again, not to rekindle a lost love, but to forge a new relationship, one based on mutual respect and a shared love for their son. It was time to let go of the echoes of the past and embrace the possibilities of the present. With a renewed sense of purpose, Alexei picked up the phone. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with awkward conversations and difficult compromises. But for Jager's sake, for their son's happiness and well-being, he was willing to try. The game of love they had once played might be over, but a new game had begun. One where the stakes were higher and the rewards far more meaningful. The midday sun cast a gentle glow over the playground, where Alexei watched his son, Jager, play. The joy and carefree laughter of the children around him formed a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside Alexei. This was their first meeting since the separation, a moment he had anticipated with a mix of longing and dread. Jager, now a little older and more reserved, had greeted his father with a cautious smile. The initial awkwardness between them was palpable, a gap widened by time and absence. Alexei's heart ached at the sight of his son, a living reminder of all that had been lost, and all that still might be salvaged. As they sat together on a bench, Alexei struggled to find the right words. How could he explain the complexities of adult mistakes to a child? How could he express his regret for a situation Jager was too young to fully understand? "Did you not want to see me anymore, Dad?" Jager's question, innocent and direct, pierced Alexei like an arrow. The pain in his son's eyes was a reflection of his own, a shared hurt that transcended age and circumstance. Alexei took a deep breath, his heart heavy with the weight of this pivotal moment. "Jager, I always wanted to see you. I've missed you more than you can imagine. Things between your mother and me, they got complicated, but it was never about you. You are the most important thing to me." Jager looked at his father, his young face etched with the confusion and pain of a broken family. "But why didn't you come back? Why did Mom cry all the time?" The innocence of Jager's questions was a stark reminder of the ripple effects of their marital discord. Alexei realized that the impact on Jager was deeper than he had imagined. The regret of his own choices, his absence, and the pain they had caused his son filled him with a profound sadness. "I made some mistakes, Jager. I wasn't there when you and your mom needed me. I thought I was doing the right thing, focusing on my job, but I was wrong. I am so sorry that I hurt you both," Alexei said. His voice choked with emotion. The sincerity in his father's words seemed to reach Jager. The boy moved closer, leaning into Alexei, seeking comfort in his presence. It was a small gesture, but it filled Alexei with a sense of hope and determination. The rest of the afternoon passed with a mix of conversations and silence. They talked about Jager's school, his friends, and his hobbies. Alexei listened intently, soaking in every detail of his son's life, the life he had missed. They played together, the physical activity a welcome relief from the emotional intensity of their conversation. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the playground, Alexei knew that this meeting was just the beginning. The path to healing their relationship would be long and fraught with challenges. But the midpoint of their story had been reached, a turning point where the possibility of a new relationship, a different kind of connection, had emerged. As they walked back home, Jager's hand in his, Alexei felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had stepped into the unknown, faced the painful realities of his past, and now he was ready to build a future where he could be the father Jager deserved, where the pain of the past could be transformed into lessons of strength and love. This day, this moment with Jager, was a beacon of hope in the tangled journey of their present. It was a promise of effort, of presence, and of an unwavering commitment to mend what had been broken. The road ahead was uncertain, but Alexei was determined to walk it, step by step, with his son by his side. In the weeks that followed their playground meeting, Alexei's renewed commitment to being a present father for Jager was met with a series of unforeseen challenges. Each obstacle seemed to conspire against his resolve, testing his determination and fortitude. At the military base, the demands of his job intensified. A critical operation was underway, and as a senior officer, Alexei's involvement was crucial. The long hours and high stakes of the mission drained him, leaving little energy for anything else. Each night, he returned home exhausted, his mind still entangled in the complexities of his professional responsibilities. Meanwhile, Vera's response to his renewed involvement in Jaeger's life was cautious, laced with a skepticism born of past disappointments. Their communication, though more frequent, was often tense and fraught with misunderstandings. Vera's protective instincts towards Jaeger, coupled with her unresolved feelings towards Alexei, created a delicate balance that was easily upset. Jaeger, for his part, was struggling to adjust to the new dynamics of their family. The sudden increase in attention from Alexei was both confusing and overwhelming for him. He began to exhibit signs of emotional distress, his behavior becoming more erratic and withdrawn at school and at home. His teachers reported instances of uncharacteristic outbursts, and Vera shared her concerns about his changing mood during their strained phone calls. Alexei felt a mounting sense of helplessness. His efforts to reconnect with his son and rebuild his trust were being undercut by the very realities he was trying to escape. The more he tried to be present for Jaeger, the more his professional obligations pulled him away. The more he sought to ease Vera's concerns, the more their conversations ended in frustration and misunderstandings. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at the base, Alexei received a call from Vera. Jaeger had had a meltdown at school, triggered by a seemingly trivial incident. The news hit Alexei like a physical blow. He realized with a sinking heart that his son was bearing the brunt of their broken marriage. Sitting alone in his living room, the walls seemed to close in on Alexei. The weight of his dual responsibilities as a military officer and as a father felt insurmountable. He was caught in a vicious cycle, his efforts to mend his personal life constantly undermined by the demands of his professional life. The following day, Alexei met with Jaeger's school counselor. The conversation was a difficult one, filled with hard truths about Jaeger's emotional well-being. The counselor emphasized the need for stability and consistency in Jaeger's life, something Alexei feared he was failing to provide. The meeting was a wake-up call for Alexei. He realized that his approach needed to change. It wasn't enough to simply be present. He needed to be actively engaged in Jaeger's life, to understand his world and be a source of stability and reassurance. That night, as Alexei lay in bed, the events of the past weeks replayed in his mind. The bad guys in his story were not tangible enemies he could confront on the battlefield. They were the internal and external forces that threatened his relationship with his son and his peace of mind. Determined not to let these challenges defeat him, Alexei made a decision. He would request a temporary leave from his military duties, a decision that would have significant implications for his career. But for him, the choice was clear. Jaeger needed him, and he needed to be there for his son, not just as a visitor in his life, but as a constant, reliable presence. As dawn broke, Alexei felt a sense of resolve he hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead was daunting, but he was ready to face it. He would fight for his son, for their relationship, and for the family they could still be. The struggle was intensifying, but so was his determination to overcome it. Alexei's request for a temporary leave from his military duties was met with a response he hadn't anticipated. His commanding officer, a stern and the book figure, saw his request as a sign of wavering commitment to the service. The rejection was not just a denial of his leave. It was a questioning of his dedication, a blow to his identity as a soldier. Feeling cornered and misunderstood, Alexei found himself in a state of deep despair. His world, once defined by the clear lines of duty and honor, was now a blur of conflicting priorities and unresolved personal issues. The rejection of his leave request felt like the final nail in the coffin of his attempts to reconcile his personal and professional life. At home, the situation was no better. Vera, having heard about his denied leave, interpreted it as a lack of commitment to Jaeger. Their conversations, which had started to show signs of thawing, once again turned cold and distant. Vera's disappointment in him was clear, and it echoed his own feelings of failure. Jaeger, sensing the tension between his parents, became more withdrawn. His moments of happiness were fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the overarching sadness of their family situation. Alexei's attempts to connect with him were met with a mixture of confusion and reluctance, a far cry from the father-son bond he so desperately sought to rebuild. Alexei's once orderly life was now in shambles, both at home and at work. His once unshakable facade of the disciplined, composed military officer was crumbling, revealing the vulnerable, conflicted man underneath. He felt adrift, caught in a storm of his own making, with no harbor in sight. The climax of his despair came one evening when, sitting alone in his dimly lit living room, the full weight of his situation came crashing down on him. The walls of the room seemed to close in. The walls of the room seemed to close in. The silence oppressive, punctuated only by the ticking of the clock. The medals and commendations on the wall, once sources of pride, now seemed to mock him, reminders of a life that felt increasingly hollow. In this moment of solitude, Alexei confronted the reality of his situation. He had tried to be everything to everyone, a dedicated soldier, a loving husband, a caring father. But in trying to wear all these hats, he had failed in each role. His marriage was in ruins. His relationship with his son was strained, and his career was on shaky ground. The stark realization that he might lose everything that mattered to him was overwhelming. The thought of losing his son, the one good thing that remained from his marriage, was unbearable. He felt a deep sense of guilt for the part he had played in the disintegration of his family, for the pain he had caused Vera and Jaeger. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, Alexei understood that this was his lowest point. The foundations of his life had been shaken, leaving him to question everything he had believed in. Duty, honor, love. The path ahead was uncertain, and for the first time in his life, Alexei felt utterly defeated. But in the depths of his despair, a flicker of resolve began to stir. Alexei realized that if he was to find a way out of this darkness, it would require a change, a shift in his priorities, and a reevaluation of what truly mattered. It was a daunting prospect, but he knew that the first step to healing was acknowledging his mistakes and learning from them. With a heavy heart, Alexei rose from his chair. The night was still young, but for him, it marked the beginning of a long journey. A journey not just towards healing his relationship with his son, but towards finding peace within himself. The road ahead was unclear, but Alexei was ready to take the first step, no matter how difficult it might be. The night enveloped Alexei's world in its silent embrace, a fitting backdrop for the introspection that consumed him. He wandered aimlessly through the quiet streets of Moscow, the city's usual vibrancy muted, mirroring his internal state. The darkness of the night seemed to echo the darkness within him, a darkness born from years of unacknowledged pain and suppressed emotions. With each step, Alexei delved deeper into his thoughts, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this precipice. He thought about his childhood, marked by the early loss of his mother and the stern upbringing by his father, a military man who valued strength and discipline above all. This upbringing had shaped Alexei into the soldier he became, but it had also taught him to guard his emotions, to see vulnerability as a weakness. As he walked, the memories of his marriage to Vera unfolded in his mind like a tragic play. He saw now how his inability to express his emotions, to share his fears and doubts, had created a chasm between them. His long absences, his preoccupation with his career, had left Vera feeling alone and neglected, setting the stage for the fateful betrayal. The realization that he had contributed to the downfall of his marriage was a bitter pill to swallow. Alexei had always seen himself as the victim of Vera's infidelity, but now he understood that their marital problems were more complex, rooted in a lack of communication and emotional intimacy. His thoughts then turned to Jaeger, his son, the innocent bystander in the wreckage of their failed marriage. Alexei's heart ached with regret for the time lost, for the moments he had missed in Jaeger's life, for the pain and confusion he had inadvertently caused him. The cold night air bit into his skin, but Alexei barely felt it. His mind was consumed by a turbulent mix of regret, sorrow, and a growing sense of clarity. The harsh truth was that he had failed as a husband and as a father, not out of malice, but out of ignorance and a misguided sense of priorities. As he walked, Alexei's mind wrestled with the question of what it meant to be a man, a soldier, a father. The values he had held onto for so long. Strength, duty, honor. Were they at odds with being vulnerable, emotionally available, and nurturing? Could he find a balance? Or had he already lost the chance to be the man he wanted to be for his family? The night gradually gave way to the first light of dawn, a symbolic end to the dark night of Alexei's soul. As the sky lightened, so too did the weight on his heart. The introspection of the night had been painful, but it had also been cathartic. Alexei felt as though he had shed a layer of armor he had been wearing all his life, exposing a more authentic self beneath. With the new day came a new resolve. Alexei knew the path to healing and redemption would be long and fraught with challenges, but he was ready to face them. He was ready to learn how to be vulnerable, to express his emotions, to be a better father to Jaeger. As he turned back towards his apartment, the first rays of the sun kissed the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Alexei took a deep breath, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid to walk it. He was ready to rebuild his life, piece by piece, starting with mending the relationship with his son and finding peace within himself. The darkness of the night had passed, and now Alexei was stepping into the light of a new beginning. With the dawn of a new day, Alexei's resolve to confront his past and reshape his future solidified. He knew that the first step on this path was to have an honest, open conversation with Vera, one that would lay bare the truths and pains they had both skirted around. Arranging to meet Vera at a quiet cafe near her apartment, Alexei felt a tumult of emotions as he prepared for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. The cafe, with its tranquil ambience and soft background music, seemed a world away from the turmoil within him. Vera arrived, looking as composed yet distant as ever. The initial exchanges were polite, the kind of small talk that belied the depth of what was to come. Alexei noted the subtle changes in Vera since he had last seen her. A certain wariness in her eyes, a guardedness in her posture. As they sipped their coffee, the silence between them grew heavy, laden with unspoken words and pent-up emotions. Finally, Alexei broke the silence, his voice tinged with a vulnerability he had seldom shown. "Vera, I've done a lot of thinking," he began, his eyes meeting hers. "I've realized that I played a role in what happened to us. I was absent, emotionally and physically. I failed you as a husband, and I failed Jaeger as a father." Vera's expression softened slightly, the walls she had built around herself showing the first signs of cracking. "Alexei, I never wanted things to end the way they did," she responded, her voice low. "I was lonely, yes, but that's no excuse for what I did. I betrayed our vows, and for that I am truly sorry." The conversation that followed was a raw and honest exchange of feelings and regrets. Alexei spoke of his struggles with expressing emotions, a remnant of his military upbringing and career. Vera shared her feelings of abandonment, of living in the shadow of his commitments to the army. They talked about Jaeger, their mutual love for their son providing a common ground amidst the wreckage of their relationship. Alexei expressed his desire to be a more present father, to rebuild the bond he had neglected. Vera, in turn, acknowledged the need for Jaeger to have his father in his life. The conversation was interspersed with moments of silence, each lost in their thoughts, reflecting on the words spoken. It was a dance of reconciliation, a tentative step towards understanding and forgiveness. As the cafe emptied and the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, Alexei and Vera reached a silent understanding. Though their marriage was beyond repair, they could still forge a new relationship as co-parents, united in their love for Jaeger. The meeting ended with a sense of closure, a feeling that a chapter had been turned. They parted ways with a promise to communicate better, to put Jaeger's needs at the forefront of their decisions. As Alexei walked away from the cafe, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The confrontation, though emotionally taxing, had been necessary. It had opened the door to healing, to moving forward. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but Alexei felt a renewed sense of hope. He had faced his demons, had spoken his truth, and in doing so had taken the first real step towards healing. The road to redemption was long, but Alexei was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The journey towards becoming the father Jaeger needed, and the man he himself aspired to be, had truly begun. In the weeks that followed the confrontation with Vera, Alexei embarked on a journey of transformation. He began to actively participate in Jaeger's life, attending school events and spending quality time with him on weekends. Each moment spent with his son was a step towards mending the broken bond, a chance to make up for the lost time. Alexei also sought counseling to address his emotional barriers. The sessions were challenging, forcing him to confront the deeply ingrained beliefs about strength and vulnerability that had defined him for so long. Through this difficult introspection, he started to understand the importance of emotional expression, not just for his own well-being, but for those he cared about. Meanwhile, Vera and Alexei maintained a cordial relationship, centered around co-parenting Jaeger. They communicated more effectively, discussing Jaeger's needs and progress with a newfound respect for each other's perspectives. The bitterness that had once marked their interactions began to dissipate, replaced by a mutual understanding and a shared commitment to their son's happiness. Jaeger, sensing the positive changes in his parents' dynamics, slowly began to come out of his shell. He smiled more, his laughter returned, and he started to open up about his feelings and experiences. The transformation in Jaeger was a source of immense joy for Alexei, a clear indication that their efforts were bearing fruit. As summer approached, Alexei planned a camping trip for himself and Jaeger, a chance to rebuild their relationship in the tranquility of nature. The trip was symbolic, a return to the Ural Mountains where he and Vera had once found happiness. This time, however, it was a journey of healing and bonding with his son. The trip was filled with small adventures and quiet moments under the stars. Alexei taught Jaeger how to fish, how to set up a tent, and they shared stories by the campfire. In these moments, away from the distractions of everyday life, Alexei and Jaeger connected on a deeper level. The natural beauty of the surroundings, the simplicity of their days, brought a sense of peace and renewal. One evening, as they sat by the campfire, Jaeger looked up at Alexei with a thoughtful expression. "Dad, I'm glad we're doing this." "I missed you," he said, his voice sincere and heartfelt. Those words, simple yet profound, filled Alexei with an overwhelming sense of gratitude and love. He realized that this was what he had been seeking all along, not just the fulfillment of his duties as a father, but the heartfelt connection with his son. "I missed you too, Jaeger." "More than you'll ever know," Alexei replied, his voice thick with emotion. He realized then that this journey was not just about healing the past. It was about building a new future, one filled with understanding, presence, and love. As the camping trip came to an end, Alexei felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. He had confronted his fears, made amends for his mistakes, and started to build a new relationship with his son. The path ahead would still have its challenges, but he was no longer walking it alone. He had Jaeger by his side, and together they would navigate the complexities of life. Returning to Moscow, Alexei faced his responsibilities with a renewed sense of purpose and balance. His experience had taught him the importance of emotional well-being, not just for himself, but for those he cared about. He had learned that strength was not just about discipline and duty, but also about vulnerability and openness. The finale of Alexei's journey was not a dramatic conclusion, but a quiet acknowledgement of his growth and transformation. He had found a way to blend his identity as a soldier with his role as a father, finding peace in the fusion of these once conflicting aspects of his life. The future was no longer a source of fear and uncertainty, but an opportunity for continued growth and deeper connections with those he loved. Months had passed since Alexei's journey of self-discovery and reconciliation began. Autumn was setting in, painting Moscow in shades of amber and gold. As he walked through a park, watching the leaves drift slowly to the ground, Alexei reflected on the profound changes that had unfolded in his life. The relationship with his son, Jager, had blossomed beautifully. They spent their weekends exploring parks, visiting museums, and sometimes just walking and talking about everything and nothing. These moments were simple yet profound, weaving a new tapestry of memories for both father and son. Alexei's approach to his military career had also undergone a transformation. He had learned to balance his professional responsibilities with his personal life. His superiors noticed a change in him. He was more focused, yet calmer. A leader who inspired not just through discipline, but through empathy and understanding. Vera and Alexei had settled into a comfortable co-parenting rhythm. Their interactions, once fraught with tension, were now marked by mutual respect and a shared focus on Jager's well-being. They were no longer the couple who had fallen deeply in love, nor the estranged pair torn apart by betrayal, but two individuals united in their love for their son. One evening, as Alexei prepared dinner, Jager sat at the kitchen table, working on his homework. The domestic scene was ordinary, yet for Alexei, it was a poignant reminder of how far they had come. "Dad, do you ever miss the old days? You know, when you and Mom were together?" Jager's question was innocent, yet laden with curiosity. Alexei paused, considering his response. "I do miss some things about the past, Jager. But I've learned that sometimes life takes us on unexpected paths. What's important is what we learn from our experiences and how we grow from them," he replied, his voice tinged with a mix of nostalgia and acceptance. Jager nodded, a look of understanding in his young eyes. "I'm glad we're like this now. I like spending time with you," he said, a smile lighting up his face. That smile, so full of warmth and sincerity, filled Alexei with an indescribable sense of fulfillment. He had found a new purpose in life, one that transcended the accolades of his military career. He had discovered the joy of being present, of being a father in the truest sense. As they ate dinner, talking about their day, the room was filled with laughter and light. The apartment, once a symbol of Alexei's solitary struggles, was now a home filled with love and new beginnings. Later that night, after tucking Jager into bed, Alexei stood on the balcony, looking out over the city. The stars twinkled above, a vast canvas of possibilities. He thought about the journey he had embarked upon, the lessons he had learned, and the relationships he had mended. The final image of Alexei's journey was not one of dramatic victory or grandiose revelation. It was a quiet acknowledgement of his growth, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. He had navigated the complexities of his heart, finding peace in acceptance and joy in the simplicity of being a father. The echoes of his past, the pain, the betrayal, the loss, had been resolved not by erasing them, but by understanding and learning from them. As he gazed at the night sky, Alexei realized that his story was not defined by its most challenging chapters, but by how he chose to write the next ones. With a heart full of hope and a spirit renewed, Alexei turned back inside, ready to embrace whatever the future held. His journey had taught him the true meaning of honor, not just as a soldier, but as a man, a father, and a human being. The echoes of honor, once faint and distant, now rang clear and true in his life, guiding him forward on a path of continuous growth and heartfelt connections.